Motorsport, boxing, horse racing can all be made safer, but never safe. That's part of the appeal for those who watch and those who take part. Well, tonight we pay our respects to the very best of his time, Ayrton Senna.
In the crowded world of Formula One, the talent of Ayrton Senna set him apart. It was a talent fulfilled. 65 pole positions, 41 Grand Prix victories, 3 World Championship titles. But after the tragedy of Imola, it's a talent that is now lost forever. So often in sport, personalities as intense and motivated as Senna are reclusive, unapproachable. That wasn't the Brazilian style. Senna made himself part of everything that surrounded Formula One.
Every year comes this time of the year, it's always, how are you? That's
In every respect, he knew what was required both on the track and off it.
The worst is the second chicane and in the third chicane. But it's because the asphalt goes like this, in the third chicane and it's like this. In the second chicane, you're coming bumpy.
Senna was the consummate master of Grand Prix motor racing, a fact readily acknowledged in the pits and the motorhome and breathtakingly demonstrated behind the wheel. He set new standards, and in so doing he pushed others hard. Too hard, it was sometimes suggested, but he pushed himself hardest of all, with unflinching ambition and a very clear-sighted desire.
Well, the desire to go faster and faster all the time, the desire to be ahead, to be the fastest, and to be successful, and to win, of course, not only races, but the championship.
It's fair to reflect that Ayrton Senna da Silva must have had these desires and ambitions from a very early age. Born in 1960 into a prosperous background in Sao Paulo, he was behind the wheel at age 4 and dominated South American kart racing from age 17. But to make progress in motorsport, any ambitious young driver needed to come to Europe. The kart champion joined the other young hopefuls in Formula Ford, then Formula 3.
It's Martin Brundle from King's Lynn in 3rd position. And now it's Senna is challenging Davy Jones as he comes down to the complex at the end of lap 3 in this 20-lap race, and Senna leads. Senna has got into the position which he must also regard as his by right. And taking the checkered flag, and out goes his hand. Ayrton Senna wins for the 10th time this season.
The 1983 British Formula 3 champion was clearly a talent to be reckoned with. The very next year, he was proving that talent in Formula 1 with the fledgling Tolman team in a Monaco downfall.
And Senna had come up through the field.
Well, Senna has shown exceptional talent. He was, the wet is where the talent shows.
And Senna challenging for that second place, and he's taken it. A magnificent bit of driving by Senna, who's now in second place. There's an official right in the middle of the road now, showing the red flag, and the checkered flag is going out. They are stopping. This is going to be the end of the Monaco Grand Prix with Alain Prost. And Prost is stopping, and Senna crosses the line before he gets there. Now that's amazing.
Senna didn't get the win, but Senna versus Prost amid a whiff of controversy was a hint of future seasons. The next move for Senna was to Lotus. The next target was race victory. It came once again in the wet at Estoril, 1985.
Senna having a look down the inside, but he's got to be so careful. He will have realised that Mansell is racing hard and trying to pass De Angelis, but I think he's got inside him. Yes, he has.
This was obviously the first of many Grand Prix victories to come.
The man of the 1985 Portuguese Grand Prix is and has been all through practice and all through the race. This man, Ayrton Senna, exits the corner and he comes down the straight. Out goes the checkered flag, and Senna has won the jubilant Team Lotus mechanics, and off goes Mansell. Nigel Mansell goes off but rejoins, and you can see that this usually totally unflappable, imperturbable Brazilian is for once absolutely beside himself. Look at him, both hands waving with joy.
This has been the greatest day of your life, without a doubt. How difficult was the race?
It was a very hard race, even more difficult than last year at Monaco, because the conditions were a lot worse than Monaco.
Senna had the ability to extract the maximum from a Formula One car, and Team Lotus appreciated that. 10 years earlier, they may have been the team to take him to his next target, the World Championship. But in the 80s, the power lay with Williams and also with McLaren. In 1988, Senna would link up with Ron Dennis. Together, not always in harmony, they'd forge glorious years at McLaren, and Senna would be crowned world champion 3 times. Senna's first McLaren teammate would be Alain Prost, already twice a world champion.
I must say it's quite difficult at the moment because my motivation is still very high, but having Ayrton in the team, it pushed me a little bit more, and I don't want to push more.
And Senna's now having a look, and Senna goes down the inside to take the lead from Prost.
Prost's misgivings were justified, as Senna won 8 times in 1988 and was champion of the world. But he showed himself to be fallible as well, going off at Monaco when heading for victory. His response for the history books was to then reel off 5 straight Monaco wins, a total of 6 Monaco victories in 7 years. He made it his European home and the principal showcase of his talents, a circuit where he could attack and also defend. This was his precision drive that kept Nigel Mansell.
Incredible achievement.
Senna and Mansell had their rivalry, they had their differences, they had their arguments. But at the end of that race, there was only respect. This was one of their misunderstandings. 1989, Portugal.
And Mansell is trying to go through and goes off. Both of them. Senna and Mansell, and Senna's out of the race.
It was more a mistake by Senna that handed the championship advantage back to Prost. The decider would be in Japan.
In a beautiful start by Alain Prost, who goes into the lead with Berger coming up and behind Senna.
Senna had to beat Prost. The title was settled in a notorious and undignified incident at the chicane.
This is the opportunity that Senna's looking for, and he's going through. Ouch! Oh my goodness, this is fantastic. They beat. This is what we were fearing might happen during the race. And that means to say that Prost has won the World Championship. Alain Prost, World Champion of 1989.
The following year, same circuit, same issue. But this time, Prost had to beat Senna. After the first corner collision, the call for greater driver discipline appeared to be aimed at Senna.
If you are ahead most of the time, if you are on pole positions more than anybody by far, if you lead races and laps from races more than anybody by far, you are always focused. You are always the focus of attention of the TV cameras and by consequence the world, the stewards, the teams, the spectators, and so on. And any single mistake you make, or anything wrong that goes with your car, or anything wrong that goes where you are, is well noted. I race with a team that is very successful. I race with people that give their maximum to win. They have demonstrated over the years before I was part of the team. But we have to do what we believe is right, not what other people would like you to do, what other people would expect you to do, because they are competition. They are not on your side. Therefore, you have to aim for what your mind tells you, what your heart tells you, and whether you get it right most of the time, but sometimes wrong, you have to be prepared to pay the price. And people must be prepared to see it and accept it, because motor racing is dangerous by definition. Motor racing is exciting. Motor racing is a sport that brings people to the limit, man and machine. And it must be seen as that. And people that are on the limit and equipment that work on the limit are bound to go wrong from time to time, and that must be taken into consideration to be part of the game.
There were aspects of Ayrton Senna that attracted suspicion and caution from fellow drivers. There was plenty more to admire, though. Champion in 88 and champion again in 1990. His aggressive self-belief showing itself best in Hungary.
And Senna coming up to join in. He's going to jump Mansell, and Mansell thinks tremendous stuff. Mansell trying to stay round the outside. switch on Senna going down, and Senna's inside Mansell. Can Mansell do him on the exit? And that was all very sad for Mansell.
1991, he was champion again with 7 victories, and his growing rivalry with Mansell took Formula One to new standards of judgment and daring.
Wheel-to-wheel stuff. Look at this, they're almost touching. Mansell gets in there.
Spain wasn't one of his victories that year, but at last, Brazil was.
Yes, Ayrton Senna achieves his ambition to win the Brazilian Grand Prix. This is what he's been working for all his career, and he's now achieved it.
Ayrton Senna, you can rank him alongside the likes of Jim Clark, Jackie Stewart, Nuvolari, and his own great hero, Fangio. In the McLaren years, here was a professional at the peak of his ability, the greatest racing driver in the world. In 1983, Ayrton Senna had his first taste of Formula One with a one-off test drive for Frank Williams. No contract to race was forthcoming, but the two men had a mutual admiration. For 1994, Williams would hold by far the best chance of a 4th World Championship. Senna made his move, a deal was done. Just 3 races into an exciting new partnership came the tragedy of Imola.
As I said yesterday outside the gate to a group of people who'd driven a very long way to lay some flowers, the loss is... it's indescribable, really. It was something we'd wanted for so long, and it was something that Ayrton had wanted for so long. And I think that we as a team have lost something so special that we knew would have been absolutely magical. I did my first real PR event with him on Sunday morning. He was fantastic. Didn't want to do it because we'd had a very busy weekend. There were a lot of pressures on everybody, as you know, at Imola that weekend because of what had happened with Roland, who was somebody we all knew well. But he came. I could see on his face as he walked towards the guests. They all had their back to him when I introduced him. At the moment he walked in, he zipped his overalls up, he straightened his cap, put the smile on, he came in. He was magnificent. And as a team, we have lost something that I think is just irreplaceable. I think more importantly, Formula One and all of us that have come in touch with Ayrton and the millions of people around the world that followed him, they've lost something even greater because Ayrton stood proud above anything, in my opinion. And I think for all of us here, for everybody out there that has followed him over the years, irreplaceable.
Ayrton's ability was total recall. He had the ability to drive a car to the very limit of its mechanical capabilities, but at the same time still had enough capacity in his mind to take in what the car was doing, the behaviour of the car, the reaction to his input, his braking, his accelerating, his steering input, and record those in microscopic detail. And then, combined with a talented engineer, he could then optimise the performance of the car because he could download that data in such a way that then, coupled to whoever he was working with, he could get the best out of what he had. And the personality of that individual was as important as that individual's technical capability. So his great performances were very often linked to engineers in the technical group with whom he worked.
I think Ayrton Senna was unquestionably the fastest racing driver in the world during this most recent time, and he certainly was the leader amongst his own peers, and that's as good as you can expect to be. Whether your name was Fangio, whether it was Moss or Clark, maybe Stewart, Lauda or Frost, you can only be as good as the best and better than them during your period, and in his era, Ayrton Senna was the man.
I know Ayrton will be missed mostly for his absolute brilliance and his dynamic driving, and being the one of few drivers in recent years to just show an extraordinary talent in a car, to be able to get that last bit out of the car around corners. And I feel Ayrton and I shared something very special in similar ways there, and I can't tell you that even being across this side of the Atlantic, that I just can't find the words, except to all his friends, to all his fans, to his family, and to Rollins as well. And I might add to the Williams team, having driven for them for 6 years, I know how they must be feeling. My sincere condolences, and he won't be with us, but he'll be never forgotten.
Ayrton Senna wasn't all racing intensity though. Away from the track he liked to relax energetically. At his beach home near Rio there was the boat, the challenge of game fishing and the excitement of water skiing to keep his reflexes sharp and his muscles trim. But one of his greatest interests was building and flying radio-controlled model aircraft, and with his hand and eye coordination he was superbly good at it. And there was a third side to Senna, Senna the businessman. From the roar and bustle of uptown Sao Paulo soars his personally owned 16-story headquarters of his commercial empire, the base for Senina, Little Senna, the darling and role model of Brazilian children. He rights wrongs and defeats the wicked, gives a good example with cheery innocence.
Acelera, Seninha. Ei, peraí, não acabei ainda não, Seninha. Vocês viram? Acabei arrumando o companheiro que também vive correndo.
And on the 10th floor, a team of gifted illustrators and animators produce the magazines and cartoons which circulate throughout South America and were soon to expand into Japan, where Senna is a folk hero. Europe too was on Senina's expansion plan. He cost over £3 million to originate. Ayrton made personal appearances to develop his licensing business. Carefully selected products carry this Senna S logo as a mark of his personal approval, and the latest, launched in Italy on the Thursday before the San Marino Grand Prix, is a sophisticated mountain bike. A new product was to be introduced at virtually every race this year. At Monaco, a Senna branded motorcycle. 1994 was looking good for Ayrton. He had achieved the goal he'd been pursuing for 2 years by joining the Williams team, which had given him his first ever Formula One drive. The world's best driver, the Williams car and the superb Williams team, allied to the Renault engine, would surely sweep all before them for yet another glorious championship year. But sadly, it wasn't to be. In Brazil, Senna lost the lead to Schumacher at the pit stop. He set about closing the gap, but the pace was too hot even for him, and the penalty was a spin, retirement and no points. At the Pacific Grand Prix, bad went to worse. From a record 64th pole position, Ayrton bogged down with wheel spin, and as he tried to tuck in behind Schumacher, was pushed off by Häkkinen's McLaren and rammed by Laurini's Ferrari. Now the pressure was really on. 20 points for Schumacher, the winner again in Japan, none for Senna. Seldom in any sport does anyone achieve the commanding heights that Ayrton Senna rose to in Formula One. His almost mystical presence, his consummate driving skill, his combination of talents and his dominant personality literally made him a legend in his lifetime. A legend which, with the passing of the years, will grow and grow as his achievements are appreciated by new generations. For many, there never has been, nor ever will be, anyone to compare with Ayrton Senna. May he rest in peace.